It's all yours, SFT.
Awesome. Thanks so much there, Praise. We are live tonight on Standing for Truth, and we've got a really, really exciting one for you tonight. As a matter of fact, it's Dr. Ken Hovind's 200th debate, so we're going to make sure that this is one to remember. This much anticipated debate is most certainly, as I said, going to be one to remember. We've got Dr. Ken Hovind defending the Genesis flood, and Jordan here defending uniformitarianism. So before we get started with introductions, I'd like to thank both these men for giving us their time, because without them, debates like this would not be possible. So before I have my co-moderator here, Nephilim Free, go over the format and structure for the debate, I'd like to first start with brief introductions from both the debaters. We can start with Ken Hovind and then move on to Jordan. So if you guys would like to just give a brief explanation as to who you are and what you may be doing with your channels or ministries. So go ahead. We can start with you, Dr. Hovind.
Well, thank you for having me. My name's Ken Hovind. I taught high school science and math 15 years. I've been a Baptist preacher for 45 years, and I take the position the Bible is literally true and scientifically accurate, just like it's written. Jesus said the creation of Adam was the beginning, and I believe he was absolutely right, and that can be proven scientifically. I believe the flood in the days of Noah happened exactly like the Bible says, covered the whole world for about a year, and that explains all the fossils and every canyons and everything else we find. So I defend the position the Bible is true, and the evolution theory is ridiculously stupid. All right?
I appreciate that introduction, Dr. Hovind. Let's move on to Jordan. Go ahead.
I'm Jordan Karam. I am a mechanical and nuclear engineer. In my off time, I run a podcast with my buddy Jared, who's a former theologian. We're both atheists now. It's called Reason to Doubt, the number 2, because there are 2 of us. And we just talk about skepticism, how to examine evidence. We go over everything from alien abductions to anti-vaxxers, and with a mixture of science and profanity. So check us out, and really glad to be here. Glad you guys invited me.
Well, I appreciate that introduction from you as well, Jordan. We're happy to have you both, gentlemen. So let's get this party started. I'm going to hand it over to my co-moderator here, Nephilim Free. He's going to go over the format and structure of the debate, and we'll go from there. Go ahead, Neph.
Okay, so welcome everybody. This is going to be fun. We have a 1-hour debate, 10-minute openings, and 6-minute rebuttals, and then a 20-minute discussion period, and a short Q&A, and that's how it's going to roll. Now, Jordan has elected to go first, and so Jordan will take the floor first. He'll have 10 minutes for an opening statement, and we'll go ahead and just get started. So, Jordan, my clock is set. When you begin speaking, I'll start the timer, and we'll get this ball rolling.
Let me just get my screen set up here. Oops.
So just to recap, 10-minute opening statements, 6-minute rebuttals, 20-minute discussion, short closing, then Q&A.
All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Phenomenal. All right. Again, my name is Jordan, and I used to be a young Earth creationist. I grew up learning from Dr. Hovind and others like him, and I was absolutely convinced that his interpretation of Genesis was correct. Eventually, I escaped my echo chamber, and I was confronted with evidence that changed my mind. I now agree with virtually every expert in every relevant field. I am convinced that the geological and fossil record took millions of years to get to the condition that we see them in today, through consistent but not constant processes. Investigating claims about the past is not unlike being a detective. You come up with a model that explains the evidence and use it to make predictions that are either confirmed or not. If those predictions are confirmed, your model is more likely to be correct. Just as a detective can figure out who probably committed a murder, even if he didn't see it himself, we can figure out what probably happened in the past, even if we didn't see it. So today, I'm going to be looking at 3 pieces of evidence: radiometric dating, specific geological formations, and fossil sorting. I'll compare the predictions of my model versus the Hovind model, and we'll see which one holds up. So let's start with radiometric dating. Some elements in nature will decay, becoming a different isotope or element. The original isotope is called the parent, and the new isotope is called the daughter. Since we know how long it takes for the parent to decay, we can measure the ratio of parent to daughter and infer how long that amount of decay would have taken to happen. This process is called radiometric dating. The prediction of my model is that we should see evidence of advanced age in these ratios. In uranium-lead dating, geologists look at zircons, which are uranium-rich crystals. There are 2 isotopes of uranium that decay into 2 different isotopes of lead. This means that you have 2 independent measurements of age, one for each isotope. That gives you a nice self-check. If these ages agree, that's very unlikely to have happened randomly. But what if lead was in the crystal originally? Well, fortunately, there is an isotope of lead, lead-204, that doesn't come from radioactive decay. So it must have been there when the zircon was formed. By comparing the ratio of lead-204 to the other isotopes of lead in the whole rock, you can infer the initial conditions of the zircon. Because of this verification and built-in double check, this method is considered one of the most reliable by the scientific community. The prediction of my model is that these ratios would indicate ages in the millions of years, and of course that's precisely what we see. Now, creationists at the RATE project have attempted to save their model by arguing that half-lives were much shorter in the past and that all requisite decay happened during the flood. But you don't get to just change the half-life without consequences. Decreasing half-life increases radioactivity. Though the water from the flood may shield Noah and his family from some sources of radiation, the human body contains radioactive isotopes such as potassium-40 and carbon-14. The dose from those isotopes alone would be 117,000 millisieverts every hour, the equivalent of 20 nuclear bombs. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I don't think Noah's going to pull through that. And that's before you consider the heat from this radioactivity, which, according to creationists at the Institute for Creation Research, would have raised the surface temperature of the Earth to roughly 22,000 degrees Celsius. That's 3 times hotter than the sun. So that's one disconfirmed prediction for the flood. Next, let's go to geological formations. Despite what you may have heard, no geologist has ever said that every kind of rock takes millions of years to deposit. Some can accumulate quite quickly, like after a volcano erupts, but the uniformitarian model would predict that others would in fact take a long time. So one example of that, underneath the Mediterranean Sea, there are vast deposits of salt 800 meters or more thick, with a total volume of more than 1 million cubic kilometers. These are huge deposits. They're comprised of several different types of salt, dolomite, gypsum, anhydrite, and halite, which paint a picture of varying conditions over time because the different types of salt require different conditions to form. This event, the event that formed all this, is called the Messinian salinity crisis. Geologists have written extensively on this topic for 40 years, but here's the broad strokes of what they think happened. The Strait of Gibraltar closed at some point 5.5 million years ago, so the Mediterranean stopped getting water from the Atlantic and began to evaporate. Shallow areas dried up completely, leaving large salt pans, while deep waters became progressively more brackish and salt precipitated onto the sea floor. This process was not linear, and regions of erosion can be seen where salts were washed away, followed by more accumulation on top. Depositing such vast quantities of salt with varying local conditions would take hundreds of thousands of years. They can't be explained using the flood model, at least I don't think so. But it matches perfectly with uniformitarian predictions. So that's 2 predictions down. Lastly, the order of the fossil record. So according to flood geology, fossils are the remains of creatures that were trapped in one single catastrophic flood event. To explain the apparent sorting of fossils, i.e. dinosaurs at the lower rocks, mammals at higher rocks, the methods proposed are hydraulic sorting, original location, and differential mobility stroke intelligence. This is great stuff for making specific predictions to test by, so let's start with that, beginning with hydraulic sorting. In fluids, denser objects fall faster, and larger objects fall slower due to greater drag. The flood prediction of hydraulic sorting is that creatures of roughly the same density will be sorted with larger specimens on top and smaller ones at the bottom. To test this, we can look at the ammonites. They were cephalopods similar to the modern-day nautilus. They had coiled shells ranging in sizes from as small as a thumbnail to 2.5 meters across. The shells also had an internal gas chamber that varied in complexity across species. So if it were hydraulically sorted, we would expect them to be sorted roughly by size. That prediction sadly doesn't match up with reality. What we actually see are small to medium ammonites all throughout the layers from the lowest to the highest. And in the highest layers, we have fossils that range from 10 millimeters to 4 feet. Now, this is not what hydraulic sorting predicts, but the ammonites are sorted by complexity. Ammonites with a simpler internal structure are found at the lowest layers, while those with a complex internal structure are found at the highest layers and never the other way around. This sorting regime matches perfectly with the uniformitarian model, where more complex structures didn't evolve until later. Next, original location. Often Dr. Hovind will plat his fossil clam, and which is a type of bivalve, and say that we generally find those at the bottom of the fossil record because they're already at the bottom of the sea when the flood happens, and so they'd be buried first, which makes sense. But bivalve fossils exist up and down the fossil record in every layer of sediment from the Devonian on up, and I have all the sources for that there at the bottom of the slide. Once again, this doesn't match the predictions of the flood model, but it's what we'd expect to see with uniformitarianism, where the layers represent deep time. And so bivalves existed throughout that time, so they exist throughout the layers. Incidentally, that doesn't fit hydraulic sorting either. The last mechanism is differential mobility stroke intelligence. According to Dr. Hovind, birds would be on top of the fossil record because they could fly above the water, but this doesn't make sense given the rest of our fossil record. For instance, pteranodons can fly. Why did they all choose to lay down and die with their dinosaur brethren instead of flying with the birds? We don't see angiosperms, which are flowering plants, until much higher layers of rock. Did all the magnolia trees gallop across the plains and outrun all of those animals? Did all the other angiosperms that currently grow in marshes and by rivers, did they collectively decide to sprout elsewhere? It doesn't seem to make much sense to me, but in a uniformitarian view, it makes a lot of sense. So let's put all of these three mechanisms together and look at the common mole. The mole seems pretty much doomed on every count. They're small and relatively streamlined, so they'd be hydraulically sorted lower. They aren't particularly fast or intelligent, so they wouldn't be able to run to high ground, and their habitat's about as low as you can get. They're already underground. All three flood predictions would put these creatures low on the fossil record. Yet the first mole fossils don't appear until the Eocene, which is one of the highest layers, above all kinds of plants, reptiles, and even other mammals. So that's three predictions and apparently three failures from the flood model. Now, this, of course, is just a tiny fraction of the total evidence in the field. There's the magnetic striping of the ocean floor, more radiometric dating methods, the entire field of evolutionary biology, et cetera, et cetera. But hopefully this gives you just a little glimpse, and it's enough to show a trend. Now, a disclaimer, I'm not a geologist, I'm not a paleontologist, a biologist, and as you can clearly see from these slides, I'm not an artist either. I'm a mechanical and nuclear engineer. But what that means is that both Dr. Hovind and myself are laymen on these topics. We're not experts, unless he has some education that I'm unaware of.
1 minute.
Cool, thanks. That's why I posted my sources on the slides, which I encourage you to check out for yourself to ensure that I'm not misrepresenting the science. It's very easy to come up with a story that sounds good at first glance, particularly if your audience has no in-depth knowledge of the subject. It's much harder to present evidence that persuades relevant experts. So as we go on, I want you to listen to both of us very closely. Do we cite our sources? Are those sources peer-reviewed or scholarly, or are they just like blogs? Once the debate is done, check both of us. Make sure that both him and I are using our sources correctly, that we're accurately representing the research. In short, you should get your science from scientists. So I'm about done, so I'll just go ahead and see the rest of my time. Really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Thanks.
All right. Thank you for that, Jordan. That was Jordan's opening statement. It's time for Dr. Hovind. Dr. Hovind, you have 10 minutes when you begin speaking.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming, Jordan. I'm sorry to hear that you switched from being a young Earth creationist to believing you came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago. I think you jumped out of the frying pan into the fire on that one. I'm always curious why a person such as yourself, who claims to be an atheist, what do they offer as replacement for the biblical creation view? They seem to always be looking to pick holes in what the Bible says. And yet, if you look at the only alternative to a creator is the world made itself. So I would assume you have chosen to believe, capital B, believe, in the evolution theory. And the Big Bang the universe had to come from somewhere. So I think you would be wise to really honestly look and say, do I really believe that a mosquito and a whale have a common ancestor? You really believe that? I mean, hello, wake up, son. Anyway, so the three lines of evidence you gave are things you want to talk about. Dating, I cover that if we can during Q&A. Maybe I have a lot of stuff on all the different dating methods: carbon dating, potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium, lead 208. I don't understand what you're thumbing for me. Oh, okay. All the different dating methods are based on some very obvious assumptions, Jordan. How much was in it when it started? Has the decay rate always been the same? Has there been no contamination? Those cannot be proven. You could, in a court of law, no dating method in an honest court of law, if such a thing exists, none of them would hold up. They would all be thrown out saying, look, there are too many assumptions. You can't know the initial content. You can't know there's not been any contamination, and you cannot know the I forgot. Oh, hey, brother, come in, brother. People coming in all the time around here. So I think there are so many variables on this that it's just not wise to call it science. It's wise to call it a belief. You can believe that if you'd like. There have been numerous examples, and I give lots of them, and I'll call them up if you need them, where wild dates have been obtained from samples, but the samples really are dated based on they're bracketed first on the geologic column. And they've admitted this for many years. What happened in 1830, Charles Lyell, a lawyer from Scotland who hated the Bible, wrote a book called The Principles of Geology, volume 1, 2, and 3. I got them on the shelf here. I don't see them now, but they're here. Anyway, these are the books that greatly influenced Charles Darwin to give up his faith. Darwin had gone to school to be an Anglican preacher, majored in theology, the only degree he ever got. And when these books were written by Charles Lyell, Darwin took one of them with him, or maybe it was sent to him on the Beagle as they sailed around the world for 5 years collecting bugs and birds. But Darwin thought, Charles Lyell really thought he was the cat's meow. He said, men of superior talent, he's talking about himself, who thought for themselves and were not blinded by authority. And Jordan, this is the same attitude you've picked up, okay, the scoffing attitude. False conclusions, futile reasoning, ancient doctrines. I'm sure you were taught in school that the Bible is an ancient goat herder's manual and all that stuff. I've heard all those things. And you rest on scriptural authority. And this is the kind of stuff they feed kids like you with going through school. And some of you swallow it. And I'm sorry. Page 41 of his book, he remarked of how much interest of religion as well as those of sound philosophy had suffered by mixing sacred writings with questions of physical science. And in your engineering training, I'm sure you're taught, physical science, the decay rates of these various objects, potassium, rubidium, strontium, lead-208, lead-206, carbon-14, etc. These decay rates are physical science, and they prove millions of years or tens of thousands, they prove the Bible wrong. That's what you were taught, and this was hammered into your head for probably years, okay? Lyell said, he reasoned philosophically against those who regarded a disordered state of Earth's crust as exhibiting signs of the wrath of God. This is a slap at Noah's flood, which is what you're going to do here tonight. And he said, if you believe the Bible, you have a religious prejudice. Lyell clearly said his goal was to free the science from Moses. In other words, get rid of the Bible explanation. Lyell's the primary guy who created what we call today the geologic column. It's been greatly modified, but you used it tonight. You got the Cretaceous, Jurassic, Triassic, Permian, Mississippian, Devonian, all that stuff. The geologic column can only be found one place in the world, and I think you should know that, Jordan. It's only found in the textbook. It's certainly not uniform all over the world. Out of these layers, there may be a random shuffling where occasionally you find a little section, but then you got to know, how do you know it's a Jurassic layer? What's the difference between Jurassic limestone and Permian limestone or Mississippian limestone? They're all limestone. They determine which one they call it by what types of fossils they're found in there. Pure circular reasoning. What happened in the early 1800s, each of these layers was given a name, like Jurassic Park. It was given an age, 70 million years ago, and it was given an index fossil. So they said, if you find this fossil in this layer, this will be called Jurassic, or Triassic, or Mississippian, or Devonian, or Silurian. The whole thing was made up in the 1830s. The geologic column, does it exist? There's a great article on creation.com, just accessed a couple months ago, saying, no, the geologic column does not exist. Now, it is a fact the Earth has many layers of rock. It's a fact Grand Canyon exists. I've been there many times, flown down in it, rafted in it, climbed up and down. The Grand Canyon exists. That's not a question. There's two options. It formed slowly by a little bit of water and lots of time, or it formed quickly by lots of water and a little bit of time. I know this, if you watch Dam Break at Dinosaur Adventureland, you'll see our little dam washed out in 7 minutes. Grand Canyon, if you plugged it up, that would take a lot of dirt, but if you plugged up Grand Canyon, lakes would back up on the north side that would be 5,000 feet deep. You're an engineer, you know the pressure 5,000 feet of water exerts. Once it starts going over the top, it's going to not only erode, it's going to be abrasive because it'll pick up sand, gravel, clay. It'll be liquid sandpaper. So you have erosion and abrasion, And you'd also have cavitation. Rapidly moving fluids, air or water, can create cavitation, a suction on the material around it. So I think there are numerous factors with rapidly moving water that would form Grand Canyon probably in a week or two, not millions a year. It is a washed out spillway. It's a breached dam. Now, it's a fact the Earth has layers of rock. I agree. I've seen them. Taught her science 15 years. You guys believe that these layers form slowly and are different ages. And yet there's nice continuity, nice neat lines between them and polystrata fossils connecting them. I think it's ridiculous to believe those layers are millions of years different in age, but you can believe what you want. The creationist says, no, these layers are all from the flood in the days of Noah. And you guys who believe in evolution, believe, capital B, are constantly trying to erase this line and make your theory part of the fact. No, Jordan, it is a fact. The Earth has layers. It is not a fact. They're different ages by millions of years. The geologic column is actually the Bible for the evolutionist. You gave up on God's word to believe in a rock book. All these layers are different ages. It can only be found one place in the world, and that is the textbooks. I would like you to show me where I can go actually see and study this geologic column, and I'd like you to explain to me, why did they name the layers what they named them? If they find limestone and then limestone later and then limestone later, why did you name it Jurassic? Why not Mississippian limestone? It's because of the index fossils, and they know it. This textbook says if there were a column of sediments, unfortunately, no such column exists. There is no geologic column. It doesn't exist. They talk about the geologic strata and all these layers. This is what, if the geologic column existed in one place, it'd be 100 miles thick. This is lie number 7 in my series of 45 lies in the textbooks you can see on drdino.com. So they said this article is detailed examination of the young Earth creationist claim that the geologic column does not exist. It is shown that the entire geologic column exists in North Dakota. Oh, so they found one place on this giant world where they think the layers happen to be in that order. Of course, there's going to be just through random shuffling. And again, I'd like to challenge, how did they decide what to call those layers? How did they decide this one is Mississippian, Devonian, Silurian? It's by the fossils. Anyway, hypersaline water. So I would talk about all this kind of stuff in my seminar. Okay. Index fossils may have been found in order in some place, but that's a result of random shuffling. It's going to happen. I could shuffle decks of cards and fling them out 5 million times and eventually get all the aces together. Yeah, that's random shuffling. So my position is these layers of strata that you see, for instance, in Grand Canyon, all had to be deposited very rapidly for multiple reasons. One, they're nice, neat layers stacked on top of each other. If that layer sat there for 4 million years waiting for the next one, don't you think there'd be some erosion marks in between the layers?
51 seconds.
Is it going to rain once in a while in 4 million years? I got 1 minute left. Okay. So my position is just simply shaking of mud and sediments and stuff like that, hydrologic sorting, would create all the layers that we see on the Earth in a matter of less than a year. We have these things at our Dinosaur Adventureland, and come on down. Jordan, I'll give you a tour of the place. You can flip this over. There are 4 different densities of sand, black, dark blue, light blue, white, and it makes 100 layers every time you do it. Water does that kind of thing. The bent layers indicate rapid deposition. The smooth gravel, all over the world, gravel is rounded. We live in a gravel pit here. I'll give you 1 billion rocks if you want. They were in a rock tumbler called Noah's flood. So come on down. We'll be glad to explain all that to you from how the tide would have done rock tumbling all over the world. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Hovind. And we're into the 6-minute rebuttal period now. Jordan, you have 6 minutes to rebut, and your time begins when you start speaking.
All right, so Dr. Hovind spent a lot of time talking about this guy named Lyell, science from the 19th century, who was formative in the stratigraphy and the layers. I mean, that's awesome, but we don't base our science on people who lived in the 19th century. They may have started, but we stand on the shoulders of giants. So
yeah, you do.
I don't, I'm not going to defend his views or his arrogance because we've got plenty of work since then. So I'm going to focus on stuff that's more modern. In terms of replacing the biblical view, I replaced it with what I perceive to be the evidence. Talking about the Big Bang and whatnot is kind of off topic for this, but I have talked about it in other forums, and I'd be happy to do that. But I'm not going to go into that today. And just the dating assumptions. So it is true. Every model has assumptions. That's true of every model, whether it's creationist or not. Doesn't matter. All models have assumptions. Those assumptions may or may not be valid. You have to test them and ensure that they're valid before you want to use them. I gave reasons why the half-life has been constant. Physically speaking, it's not just that they hammered it and I just accepted and hit the I believe button on that. The reason that we can be confident the half-lives are constant, if the nucleus was a nickel, the nearest electron would be 3 miles away. The nucleus of especially heavy elements is very insulated from environmental pressures. So in the radioactive decay is mediated by the weak nuclear force, which is constant throughout the universe, or at least it appears to be so. So there's no real reason to think it would change. Now, there is one exception. That exception is electron capture. That is relevant for potassium dating, for instance, because that is a method where the nearest electron falls into the nucleus, turns a proton into a neutron, emits a neutrino, and because it is based on the closeness of that electron that it impacts it, extremely high pressures have been shown, for instance, for beryllium-7, to change that dating or that the half-life by about 0.5%. And that's at pressures we'd experience miles and miles down, way deeper than we're doing any dating. So that assumption seems to be reasonable and supported. Initial conditions, different dates deal with that different ways. I talked about how uranium lead deals with it, with the non-radiogenic lead. You've got outgassing and then ways to deal with errors there. We can get more into that later, but it's a known problem and it's a problem with solutions. If it didn't have solutions, we wouldn't do it. Non-contaminated, a lot of the times the contamination would actually make things younger. With uranium lead dating, for example, if the uranium were weathered away, it would stop decaying into lead. That would freeze the clock. So when we looked at it, it would be artificially young. A lot of the different dating methods are like that, so that doesn't really help. At least it may make the thing less accurate than we'd like. I mean, no method's going to be perfect. There's always error bars, but it certainly helps get rid of the 10,000-year-old age. For the types of layers, I am not a geologist, so I'm going to be relaying to you what I got from the experts. I don't claim any expertise in this field, so but what I've read from them in terms of the erosion marks, that's actually something that SFT hit me with when I debated with him, and I had to give the same kind of plea of ignorance. I looked into it, and apparently, according to geologists, there is evidence of erosion between layers. They're called unconformities. The one I think that you're most referencing is called a disconformity. According to the relevant literature, it's very difficult to recognize in a casual glance. So I defer to geologists and their expertise on that. But it is something that actually does happen. In terms of the way they named it, I don't know who was the creative guy who came up with the names. Probably that Lyle jerk, I guess. But it's my understanding, and I am not a geologist, so please do take these for the ravings of a drooling idiot. I think it's because of you can follow Steno's principles of stratigraphy. Layers are laid down consecutively because you can't lay them on air, and so you can track layers over large areas. And then you can make a construct, which is helpful for learning the geological column. It's not intended to mean this is the column that exists anytime you dig in the ground. That's, of course, not what it means. It means that if there had been no erosion, if it had happened everywhere, this is what it would look like. But reality is, of course, way more complex than that. That's why they have to spend 10 years getting their doctorate to become experts. Talk about the clean lines. The clean lines are sometimes an illusion. Look up disconformities. Polystrate fossils in the literature, they are called in situ fossils or T0 assemblages or upright fossils. There's a fantastic paper on this, 2011, by DeMichel and Falcon Lang, titled Pennsylvania Fossil Forests and Growth Position. So look that up. It really breaks down exactly how it happens. So basically, these are fossils that go through several layers of mud. For most of them, it means that they were buried rapidly from a geological standpoint. But you can see coal seams, which is the forest floor. So it appears that they were there. You can see the root systems. But the cool thing about this, the reason that it doesn't appear was one single event, is you can see multiple, in some places in that paper they describe it, multiple trees on top of each other. So you have a tree, it's buried, it's fossilized, and a little bit higher you have another tree, and it's buried, and it's also fossilized, and a little bit later. So I'm not sure how a flood would account for that. And lastly, just the whole scoffing attitude thing. I don't consider myself superior. I used to be a young Earth creationist. I changed my mind because of evidence, and I'd be happy to change it back. I just want to know the truth. This appears to be the truth from my best estimate. But if I got different evidence, then I would change my mind. And I hope everyone would embrace that view. And that's it.
All right. Thank you for that, Jordan. Now, Dr. Hovind, it's your turn to have 6 minutes for rebuttal when you begin.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Jordan, you mentioned the erosion marks between the layers are, you said, difficult to recognize. That's code word for only experts can find them. I have studied many of these layers. We have them here on our property. I live in a gravel pit. There are 7 layers of gravel that start here in Alabama and go to North Carolina. There are hundreds and probably maybe even thousands, but certainly hundreds of gravel pits between here and North Carolina, mining these same layers of gravel. Obviously, I think there was something huge that did that. And I don't know if you're aware of the stratigraphy work done in Colorado at the, I forget what it's called right now. No, it wasn't Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Anyway, when water's moving sideways, it'll drop off 6 or 8 or 10 layers simultaneously. So it'll look like the layers were deposited horizontally or vertically, but actually they're deposited horizontally, multiple layers. So you can actually get a layer at the bottom that's younger than a layer at the top, depending which way the water's flowing. And during Noah's flood, the tide would be flowing both directions. Now, I left off completely discussing fossils. I'm going to do my whack an atheist here in a few minutes when we're done. Tonight it's Richard Dawkins. Every Wednesday night on our YouTube, Kent Hovind Official, we do whack an atheist, like whack-a-mole, knock them back down. Richard, and I'll be glad to put you on the list if you'd like. And your friend, your other buddy. Why the profanity's in there? Is that add intelligence or something? I don't know, but we'll see. Okay, Richard Dawkins says, show us your intermediate fossils, the skeptics say. There are plenty of intermediate fossils. That's what he said. Plenty of intermediate fossils. And I'll tell Richard tonight, and I'll tell you right now, fossils are not evidence for evolution. You cannot prove any fossil you find had any offspring. All you find are bones in the dirt. We have lots of fossils here. We have thousands of petrified clams in the closed position. Some of these are found on top of the Peruvian Andes Mountains. They're found on top of Mount Everest. When Edmund Hillary got there in 1953, they put their victory flag on top of the mountain. The top several hundred feet is petrified clams on top of Mount Everest. I think the flood model explains that pretty good. The Bible says toward the end of the flood, Psalm 104, the mountains arose, the valleys sank down. I believe the earth was completely covered in water, probably about a mile deep everywhere. Lots of stuff drowned, lots of fossils formed. And then during the last few months of the flood, the thin spots on the earth's crust would sink in, maybe a mile or two. The thicker spots would bounce up in response, like tipping a teeter-totter. And so the mountain ranges all over the world, it's interesting, the mountain ranges follow the coastline. The Rocky Mountains, the Pacific, the Appalachian Mountains, the North Atlantic, the Alps follow the Mediterranean. So I think the mountain ranges and the ocean basins formed at the same time because of the same feature. Sections of land would tip. I mean, if you get a 2,000-mile piece of land to tip 1 mile, we're talking 0.05%. So and that would let the water rush off, and the rushing of the water would form the canyons through the soft mud very rapidly and bury lots of fossils. How many animals died today around the world? Like billions, and none are going to fossilize. But it's not hard to find fossils, Jordan. They're everywhere. Fossils are everywhere. So I think the best explanation for fossils at all is A, rapid burial in mud and preservation from decay long enough for them to be either replacement fossil with mineralization of the bone, or a casing in the case of an impression fossil. But you cannot prove any fossil. I cannot prove this clam had any children. You can't, in a court of law, they throw it out and say, I'm sorry, you can't prove this had any children. Secondly, you cannot prove it had any fossil, it had any offspring that lived. It might have had children, but they all died. Thirdly, you could not prove any fossil in the world had any offspring that lived that were different. Who would the imaginary different offspring mate with? Let's suppose you do get a bone in the dirt that's able to produce something different than itself. Who is it going to marry? You got to get two at the same time of the opposite sex in the same place, and they got to find each other and be interested. And then you got to replace the whole population of other ones with those two new ones that have the new improved species, improvement. It's just not science. Secondly, why would anyone believe that bones in the dirt could do something no plant or animal today can do? Produce offspring that are different. No farmer's ever seen a cow produce a non-cow. Dogs, nobody's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog or a chicken produce a non-chicken. It's never been seen. So you have chosen to put your faith, your belief, in the completely unseen theory that animals can change to something else. Nobody's ever seen that. I feel sorry for you. I think you gave up the only thing that's logical, God's word. to accept something illogical. Last thing you said,
1 minute.
all models have assumptions. I agree. The creation model has assumptions. I assume there's a creator. I assume there was a worldwide flood. I think the evidence points that way. I cannot prove that in a court of law. And you cannot prove that mosquitoes and whales are related. You can believe that because of whatever reasons you want. And you can believe we all came from a dot of nothing 13.772 billion years ago, but it's not science. So my question would be very simple. Since neither creationists nor evolutionists can technically prove scientifically their point, why are we all forced to pay for your religion to be taught? Because evolution is a religious belief. You've chosen to believe it on faith. Nobody's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog. But you do believe a dog and a mosquito are related. Oh, it's fine. You can believe that. I don't care. I don't think it's science. I don't think it's smart. I don't think it's common sense. But I do object to paying to have the kids taught that like it is part of science. It's not part of science. Evolution should be taught in a religion class, if it should be taught at all. Okay, go ahead.
All right, thank you. That's Dr. Hovind's rebuttal period. Now we're going to have a 20-minute open discussion period, and after that we'll have our closing statements. So you guys have 20 minutes to talk. Let me set my timer for 20 minutes, and we'll have a nice cordial conversation about uniformitarianism or versus the flood. How's that? Starting now.
Sure. I just wanted to answer the whole profanity thing. Jared and I are both veterans, so we just can't help it. It just happens.
We'll see. We'll see if God accepts that excuse one day. I spent 9 years in prison. I heard plenty of profanity. To me, it shows stupidity, not intelligence. But go ahead.
You have to use it creatively.
You guys put things in your mouth I wouldn't hold in my hand, but that's all right.
You have anything you want to start with? We can roll from there if you want.
Well, maybe the layers. Well, you said you're not an expert in the geologic column, but I can show you pictures. Maybe said you've seen my seminar of petrified trees standing up, running through two different seams of coal. I should call that up here, but I got 14,000 slides. But if you have a tree standing up, running through a seam of coal, 5 or 6 layers of rock, and then a different seam of coal. Up in North Alabama, they find a lot of them, the Mary Lee Formation and the Blue Creek Formation, both layers of coal. According to the theory, a forest has to grow. The trees have to get compacted, turned to coal over millions of years or some amount of time, and then more layers deposited on top, and then a whole new forest has to grow. And yet there are no roots into the layers below, none. And the tree, I'll just call it up here. The tree is connecting 2 layers. Let's see. Geologic column. It's better if they ask the questions in the same order that I have my answers. That would help a lot.
Well, while you're pulling it up,
anyway,
the picture.
Polystrate fossils going through 2 different seams of coal, I think, completely negates the idea that you were taught that this can be answered. I don't think there's a possible answer for that other than all the layers formed in less than a year, which you would get. How many layers just formed on this thing in the last 10 minutes while I let it sit here?
So I'll give you 20? The answer that's my understanding, and I am not a geologist,
okay.
so please get your geology from geologists. But my understanding would be that the tree would be buried at least part of the way, and that would cause the first coal seam eventually after it compacts. But all that's necessary for the tree to fossilize is that it's buried faster than it decays, and trees can last without decaying for sometimes years and decades. It depends on the tree and the conditions.
I agree.
So my understanding as a layman would be that you'd bury the original tree, another forest bed would begin to grow, and then being in a situation where it's likely to be buried, that's evidenced by it happening once, it gets buried again. And so you'd have the appearance of this tree buried once, buried however many times, and you'd have another coal seam buried again. That would be my understanding. How would that happen with a second coal seam, though, in the flood? What would that represent?
Well, during the flood, you would get log mats as big as Texas floating back and forth across the ocean, being carried back and forth with the tide. I mean, the flood would rip up trillions of trees, and they would tend to float in log mats in the vertical position, a horizontal position. So as any log mat floats around, certain types of wood, or depending how bad it's fractured from being twisted out of the ground, will be waterlogged faster than others, and they'll sink to the bottom. Mount St. Helens has multiple layers forming at the bottom of Spirit Lake, and it had only been 40 years since the volcano erupted. Here's a petrified tree standing up, running through multiple layers. Here's a person standing next to a petrified tree. These layers that are running right up to the tree do not have any signs of being inclusion, being pushed into place, or being shifted in any way. The layers are nice, neat, smooth layers. I've been to see them in Yellowstone National Park. There are 27 layers of wood standing up, many of them broken off, like this one here, Yellowstone National Park. Petrified trees in the standing position. You can watch my video number 4. Here's the coal mine in North Alabama where they find one of the guys who works there, Dr. Donald McDonald, Troy State University, wrote to me and said, "Can't we find them all the time?" He works in the coal mine, digging for the coal. There they are right there, digging out the seams of coal. He said, "You'll find petrified trees. Sometimes the tree is sitting right on top of a seam of coal, no roots whatsoever, just like sitting there." This one was running way up here, and the rest of it broke off. So the Mary Lee and the Blue Creek Formation are coal seams up in North Alabama here. We don't have any coal down here that I'm aware of, but in our gravel pit. But if you look at the fossils that are found, Don sent me this. He said, "Kent, we got fossil A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And if you put them all together, tree H runs up through the Mary Lee Formation. Tree A runs through the Blue Creek Formation. But yet they also both run through this layer in between. Hold it. That's scientific evidence that those layers had to form before either tree could decay completely, which would certainly be less than millions of years, maybe 10 or 20 years. Under mud, maybe preserved a little longer. Here's one that is running through a seam of coal at the bottom. This is in Tennessee. A different seam of coal at the top. And in between are these layers budded right up to it. Now, I know what you were taught. I was taught the same stuff. These layers form slowly over millions of years. First of all, they tell you the top layer is younger than the bottom layer. I say, stop right there. Think about it. Where's this top layer coming from? Outer space? All these layers were in this glass thing at the same time. They're sorted by hydrologic sorting, but you can't say the top layer is younger than the bottom layer.
All right. So
all the layers are the same age.
You've hit a lot of things. So let me try to hit some of them.
Okay, go ahead.
So trees don't decay immediately. All that's required is that they're buried before they decay. And I don't see why that would be an issue in my model. It just means that they have to be buried quickly, geologically speaking. You can have floods. There just don't need to be global floods. So I don't see why that's a particular issue. I would wonder why, if things are floating, so obviously plants float when there's a flood and whatnot, why we wouldn't see a bias of plants. Like, why do we have plants all throughout the fossil record? Why doesn't it appear that they were deposited selectively by floating? That would be a question. You hit a lot of stuff. I lost track of a lot of it. So
yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, so I don't know. I lost track of any other point you might have made if there's something I missed.
Okay, let me object and say there's no such thing as a fossil record. There are fossils, lots of fossils. We have thousands in our museum, but there's not a record. None of them have a date stamped on them. None of them can talk. So somebody's putting their interpretation on them.
Yeah, but
they would say this clam is found in the Jurassic layer, so therefore it is 70 million years old. It doesn't say 70 million on it. Somebody put their interpretation on it, and you can believe their interpretation if you'd like. But
that's
a
the case.
petrified clam it had to be buried alive. It's closed, Jordan. Clam.
That's first of all, that wouldn't be. So you have to look at a model with its predictions, and
I agree.
Right. So it wouldn't be a prediction of my model, or when I say my, I mean the scientific community's, the Uniformitarian model, that all the clams would suddenly spring open as soon as they die. I have a quote. The clams do open as the muscles relax, but if they were buried quickly, which fossils are evidence of being buried quicker than they could decay, Roger Portell, and the Invertebrate Paleontology Collections Director at the Florida Museum of Natural History, says, as clams die, fine sediment and particles wash inside. As more sediment settles on top of the clams over time, they close, becoming excellent long-term storage containers. So what's happening is the clam is buried and dies. It starts to open, but sediment is being packed on top. That would tend to force it close in some cases. So having fossilized closed clams, say that 10 times fast, doesn't refute anything in my model. And it is definitely true that when I say fossil record, what I mean is the observation of these fossils as we present them and as have been ordered by paleontologists. You have to put an interpretation on evidence you see. So it's not a matter of proving. You only have proofs and math. The What you need to do is test it to see if predictions are disconfirmed, and if the predictions are not disconfirmed, then the model is more likely to be true, subject to future evidence. So it doesn't bother me that I don't know. I don't expect to know. I expect to go with what's probable.
Okay. I would make a prediction that a log in the mud would probably decay in less than 100 years. I think it'd be hard-pressed to find any tree under mud for 100 years that is still intact, especially since many of them still have the bark on them. But in rolling back and forth, they saw with Mount St. Helens blowing all the trees into Spirit Lake. They said probably 20,000 trees got blown into Spirit Lake. When I was up there, my sister lives up near there. It's amazing what that volcano did. But those trees, every time the wind blows, they roll back and they slide back and forth on the water. The wind blows them to one end, back. So they're always rolling against each other. The bark rolled off pretty quickly and settled to the bottom. That's going to form a layer of coal. Coal can be made in the laboratory in a couple of weeks under heat and pressure. That's all you need to convert the cellulose into coal. It's just a different form of cellulose, basically, but which, of course, is greatly going to affect the carbon decay rate. But I would predict if we look at these trees with a magnifying glass where the layers meet the tree, there will be no example, you will not find evidence of them being pushed in, intruded. You will find evidence of these layers being rapidly deposited. And I predict you will find the top layer is not rotted or decayed more than this layer. If it's stuck in the mud at the bottom and these layers form slowly, you would see if the top part is exposed for any amount of months or years, you're going to see more and more decay. The tree should be rotting coming in, should be getting smaller at the top, not just because of the way trees grow, but because of rotting wood, and that's not evidenced.
So
I'm
not a geologist, but I think I know how that would work. So as the tree is being deposited, again, these layers can deposit quickly. So it's not that a quickly depositing layer invalidates my model. Some layers do deposit quite quickly. But if the tree rotted to the point when it's exposed that it wouldn't have any structural integrity, the next slide is going to shear that off. That's why you see these trees with a sheared top. That's exactly what happens. So the prediction, I mean, that's correct, but it doesn't invalidate the model. But again, I'm not a geologist, so my understanding of that is very limited. If I could talk about the half-lives, because you mentioned that a couple times. So what mechanism, aside from electron capture, which pressure can change, so setting that aside, what mechanism would change the half-lives for these other decay patterns, and what evidence do you have of that being observed?
Well, I think we have all sorts of examples of things that are dated by the layer that they're found in, and then when they do carbon date them, or potassium, argon, or rubidium, strontium, they find wild errors. So which one are you going to count? Back in 1976, they knew from American Journal of Science, radiometric dating would not have been feasible if the geologic column had not been erected first. Oh, whoa, what's he saying here? You have to bracket the date you're looking for. If I took this to a university and said, how old is this clam? First question they would ask, where did you find it? What difference does that make where I found it? Take a piece of coal to any university and say, how old is this? Would you carbon date it? Because coal contains carbon. And you know full well, Jordan, if coal is 220 million years old, there'd be no carbon-14 left in it with a half-life of 5,730 years. But coal still contains carbon-14, doesn't it? It's not millions of years old. But the first question they're going to ask is, where did you find it? Like, what difference does that make where I found it? They have to bracket it first with the geologic column. This is pure circular reasoning, and a first grader can figure that out.
Fossils
have been, and go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, you have to determine the method to use in order to date it.
Now, stop and think what you're saying. You have to bracket the age by the geologic column to decide if you should use potassium or rubidium or strontium or lead-208 or lead. You're saying exactly what I pointed out. This is the hypocrisy of the whole thing.
Allow me to speak.
You have to first decide how old.
Allow me to speak more precisely.
You can't decide.
Okay. So when I say you need to decide what method to use, I mean methods are expensive, and you just don't throw every method at every fossil because we'd run out of money. So it's kind of like if you found that fossil so far down, it would be a waste. Well, it would be a waste of time to date a fossil with carbon dating anyway, because there's no carbon in it. But if you find something,
what if it contained carbon?
you
Carbon
can test
dating
it.
costs about $500, if I recall.
You can test it, and if you find significant amounts of carbon that can't be explained by other sources, such as uranium decay, then you can publish those sources, and you'll revolutionize the dating world. I don't expect that'll happen. It's not like they're being dishonest by this bracketing. If you wanted to pay for all the different methods, and they often use different methods, then you can do that. It's not like they're hiding from it. It's just it's unreasonable to expect them to date every single sample with every single method.
Okay, are you aware of, is it Jack Horner or John Horner that has the museum in Montana? He has the dinosaur bone that was found with soft tissue still in it. He has it in his possession. A guy called him and they recorded the call. He said, Mr. Horner, would you please carbon date that dinosaur bone because it has soft tissue, which would still contain carbon? He said, no, I won't do it. They said, we'll pay you $20,000 if you will carbon date it. We'll pay for the testing, $2,000 or whatever it was, plus we'll pay $20,000 if you'll carbon date it. Just a donation to your museum. He said, no, I can't do that. He said, why not? He said, because we know it's too old. This is such blatant prejudice and blindness. It's got soft tissue. For heaven's sake, it's got carbon. He was offered $25,000 to carbon date it. What would be wrong with carbon dating a dinosaur bone?
It would destroy
because it's too old. Well,
it would destroy parts of the sample.
Old, right?
It would destroy parts of the sample. As you know, samples that are that well preserved are extremely rare. So you're not just going to throw this sample in the trash. It doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, if you found the sample, you could do whatever you wanted with it. No one's going to stop you from doing it. But you can't expect to light this other guy's fossil on fire and him being okay with that. But you still haven't given me a way. Give me a mechanism by which these half-lives are going to change. What's your mechanism?
Well, there was an article published, I don't have it in front of me here, but a couple of years ago, they took under extreme heat and pressure and got, I think it was, I forget which of the long dating methods, the long age ones, to decay in a few seconds. It went from 1.4 billion, I guess it'd be potassium to argon, whichever, if that's the right number. It instead of 1.4 billion years to go for half of it to decay, just in a few seconds under heat and pressure. Would you agree that extreme heat and extreme pressure could influence all the dating methods?
No, because potassium argon dating decays by electron capture. As I mentioned earlier, that is shown to be slightly vulnerable to pressures. So setting that one aside, because pressures can affect the orbitals of electrons, so that dating method, got it. Setting that one aside.
So can temperature. So can temperature.
Okay.
Temperature can affect the orbitals of electrons. Go ahead.
Sure. So that method, setting it aside just for the sake of argument, what about all of the other methods? How are the half-lives of those changing? Since they are not shown to be vulnerable to temperature and pressure, and there's no reason we'd expect they would be.
Let's start with your assumption. Carbon-14 is not vulnerable to anything.
3 minutes,
Then date
gentlemen.
the dinosaur bone that they found with soft tissue in it. They found a dinosaur bone with soft. Several have been found. It's not like it's rare, and it doesn't take that much of the sample to test. It wouldn't destroy the whole fossil and set it on fire. They got a dinosaur bone with soft tissue in it. Take 2% of it, dedicate it to science, and you got a guy offering $20,000 donation to your museum. I tell you why Horner doesn't want to do it. It would destroy the evolution theory, because it would come back just a few thousand years old, because that's all carbon dating does. But if carbon-14 indeed decays to carbon-12 at a known half rate of 5,730 years, if that is indeed true, and indeed that bone is 70 million years old, there should be no carbon-14 left. I'll be willing to bet you $100, that's about all I can afford, that there's carbon-14 in that dinosaur bone.
If I had a dinosaur bone, to give you, Dr. Hovind, I'd give it to you. And I'd expect...
You would?
Yeah, I would. I just don't have one. I don't expect I'll get one. But
if I do... some fragments here.
I do, I'll give it to you. So I'd expect that test to come with some small amount of residual carbon from contaminants. And when you get below represented ages of 50,000 years or less, you're starting to get into the error bars. So that's not a significant amount of carbon. I would expect that there would be no statistically significant amount of carbon-14, unless
I will predict it'll have significant. I'll predict it'll have significant amounts of carbon-14, way beyond the error range, and I would predict if it was demonstrated that a dinosaur bone had carbon-14 still in it, significant amounts, and you could isolate all the contamination effects by digging down deep enough into the bone, into the marrow, someplace where it was not contaminated, and if it could be contaminated, how do you know all the other samples they've taken over the years were not contaminated? Why would you isolate one age and throw it out when let's throw them all out then?
By contamination, I mean no sample is going to be perfectly clean. You're going to have some level of contamination, but they have rigorous lab procedures, as I'm sure you know, to try to minimize that to the greatest extent possible. So if you ever find an offer on that, I'll throw in $100 of my own money to get that to happen. So I'm pretty confident. And if it isn't, I want to know. Okay, I think you're correct. You really do want to know. I think you got taught something that drew you away from Christianity. I think you made a giant mistake. Now, all of this argument tonight, the geologic column and the carbon radioactive dating methods, is all about really one thing: great age. You guys have to get frantic when they start attacking the idea that the Earth is billions of years old, because without billions of years, your theory falls apart. But this is only the first hurdle you have to overcome.
That's
about the end. Years for your frog to turn to a prince.
Gentlemen, that's about the end of the discussion period. Let's give each one of you 30 seconds to finish up your thoughts. Since Jordan, you began the discussion, give a 30-second summary of your thoughts in this discussion, 20-minute discussion period, and then we'll get Dr. Hovind to do the same thing, and then we'll move on from there.
Is this my closing statement?
No, our closing statements are to come. Just give a 30-second, overview of what your thoughts are on the discussion, and we'll give Dr. Hovind the same thing, and then we'll move to the.
I don't get frantic when someone comes with evidence that might contradict something I believe. I'm demonstrably willing to change my beliefs based on the evidence. So I don't get frantic. I just get interested. It's not about being able to prove something with 100% certainty. If you wait for 100%, you will never get anything. It's about what's probable, what's plausible, and just making the best predictions you can and being willing to change your mind. That's what it's all about.
Okay, Dr. Hovind, if you'd like, for 30 seconds, you can summarize your thoughts about the open discussion period, what you talked about, and then we'll move to closing statements.
Sure. I think it's pretty obvious that there are numerous examples where the carbon dating, none of the dating methods have been proven to work 100% of the time, or even they come up with some really wild dates, and they won't date that dinosaur bone because they know full well what'll happen. And the great age, which is really the whole tonight discussion is about, is essential for evolution. Just this one point, if it could be proven the Earth is not billions of years old, the entire evolution theory collapses in a heap. And they know it, and I know it. And they don't want that because they like evolution, because it gives them freedom from God's rules for, like they don't like the thou shalt not commit adultery and those kind of things. So that's really why they're frantic to hang on to this thing. So if you're really honest, Jordan, I think you are, we'll get you converted right back to young Earth creationist.
Cool.
Okay?
All right. So now it's time for closing statements. Nobody told me how long the closing statements would be.
It's short.
It's 5 minutes. Is that appropriate for you, fellas?
I'll just need a minute or two.
Okay. Well, how about a minute or two? Well, that would be awful short.
Good.
Maybe Dr. Hovind might like to use more than a minute or two.
For 5 if he wants it. Good. I don't care.
Forget the clock. Just let him go as long as he wants.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
You want me to go first? So traditionally in closing, you relitigate the arguments and try to get in some parting jabs or whatever. But this is YouTube, so you can just replay the debate if you want to hear what my arguments were. Instead, I just want to ask, I want all the listeners to ask yourselves, if I was wrong, would I want to know it? For me, that answer is yes. And if your answer is yes too, the next time you hear something that evolutionists, in air quotes, supposedly believe that seems stupid, ask the question, is that actually what they believe? And if so, why? Is it that they're all morons, or they're all deluded, or they're all afraid, or whatever? Or is it possible that maybe I'm just missing something? Maybe there's more to it than I've got right now. And then go find out. That's the next essential step. See what the actual scientists have to say. Hear what their model is. Take a course online. MIT offers them for free. You have absolutely nothing to fear from asking questions. One of the best parts about being skeptical is that if you ever find out you're wrong, just change your mind. Bam, you're not wrong anymore, like magic. So if you'd like to hear more about skepticism, how to ask questions, how to look at the good peer-reviewed evidence, head on over to Reason 2, the number 2, Doubt, our podcast. You can find us on Facebook, on iTunes. We cover everything, like I said, from aliens to anti-vaxxers. We have a ton of finds, so a ton of fun. So this was a blast. Thanks for inviting me. And that's it.
Okay, Dr. Hovind, your closing statement, sir.
Well, thank you. I hope you do really have reasons to doubt, because you need to start doubting this theory you've been taught, that a mosquito and a whale both came from an amoeba 3.5 billion years ago from a pond of water which formed on a molten rock 4.6 billion years ago, which came from a dot of nothing. I think it's time you start doubting that. And so, whoa, what have I been sucked into here? I think the flat earthers ought to stop and slap themselves and say, what have I been sucked into here? You got sucked into one of the dumbest ideas in the history of the world, that we all came from a rock. Anyway, I agree. But you mentioned several times that about peer-reviewed articles or nothing to fear from asking questions or ask actual scientists. I think if you went to North Korea and did a survey, you would find everybody there believes in communism. Because if you don't, you get executed. I think you'll find in America, the academic circles, if you don't accept and at least toe the party line with this evolution stuff, you will get excommunicated from the temples of higher learning. So I think it's not execution yet, but it is certainly academic Siberia if you dare to even question the evolution theory. I think your reasons to doubt ought to investigate. Why is there such a prejudice against the idea that there's a God? What would be wrong with there being a God creating these things? I have no idea who made this pen, but I'd be willing to bet $100 somebody made it. These things don't happen by chance. And if you look at your human body, look at a single cell. You're an engineer, for heaven's sake. Do you think a cell could create itself by chance over billions of years? Do you really, really believe that? Son, wake up, okay? Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move then to a question and answer session. Standing for Truth has questions already saved that I guess he received from people, and he's going to read off the questions to you. So I'm just going to step back and hand it over to Standing for Truth. He's going to ask the questions, and you fellows can give your response to them. Standing for Truth, you ready, brother?
Yes, brother. Thanks so much to the debaters for a great debate. Very lively. We had a really big audience tonight with a ton of questions. We are just at the hour mark, so I don't want to keep the debaters too late. So I'm just going to pick 2 questions for each debater from the audience. So we'll end it quick. We'll end it really quick. I'm just going to pick a couple questions here. At random. This one is for Dr. Hovind from James Downard. He asks, has Kent studied the technical criticism of accelerated decay? I think he's referring to a possible heat problem in the global flood model. Go ahead, Dr. Hovind.
I guess I'd like to see what problem he's talking about. I'm not aware of anything that can't be answered so far. I've not seen any technical problems with the flood model. The Bible says certainly there was a flood, and the Bible, if you look at the Bible model, there was water under the crust of the earth, according to Genesis chapter 1. The earth was founded on the water and in the water. So the water in the crust would be superheated. It would crack out through the fault lines and come to the surface, and the superheated water would kill everything within 100-mile or some effective radius of the cracks. And that was where the fault lines are. There's a great website by Walt Brown, creationscience.com, that deals a lot with that, the subterranean water. And this superheating of the water jetting out under intense pressure from 10 miles of rock on top, I think can explain lots of things that we see with the chemistry of the ocean and the chemistry of some of the fossils that are found. But that's be a long discussion on that. So I guess I'm not aware of any problems with the flood model that can't be answered. So I'd like to see a more specific.
Awesome. Okay, thanks for that answer there, Dr. Hovind. This one is for Jordan. It's from Rock Art in the chat. He asks, let me see here. John Baumgartner predicted cold slabs under the earth if they had been subducted just 4,000 years ago. These predictions have come true. Why do evolutionists ignore this? Go ahead, Jordan.
Again, I'm not a geologist. That's not my area of expertise. So I'm not familiar with all the literature. My understanding as a layman but knowing heat transfer, would be you'd expect some amount of cold slabs in the magma because heat transfer takes time. And as it's continually moving, as parts of it is melting, you'd get more fed in. That's my understanding as a layman, but I'm just a drooling idiot when it comes to that field. Go talk to a geologist.
Okay, if we're done with that question, I just got one more for each of the debaters. So this one is for Kent. Has any creationist ever presented arguments for how strata became rock lithification? I just read that.
I can make strata in my yard in a few minutes. You get a layer of mud, you lay it out in the sun, it turns to rock. I mean, almost all the sedimentary rock was at one time in the semi-liquid or liquid form. Limestone, obviously, slate, shale, all the different, not igneous rock, but all the sedimentary rock, of which 75% of the earth, I think, is covered by sedimentary rock. It was mud at one time. We got layer after layer right here on our property. This was a gravel pit for 50 years. They dug gravel, sand, and clay out of here. We have layers of clay like 4 or 5 inches thick that just go for hundreds of feet. Just modeling clay like you'd buy at Walmart. So yeah, the stratification, we can make strata in minutes. Take some mud, get some clay, mix it with water, make a paste out of it, lay it out in the sun. You can make strata in, well, a couple hours, maybe not minutes, but depending how hot it is that day. It gets hot down here in Alabama. I could probably make it in about an hour. Come on down, I'll make some for you.
Okay, thanks for that answer. Right before this last question, I do want to thank you, gentlemen, for staying slightly over time. It's been a really good debate. Like I said, a big audience today. Everybody enjoyed. So this last question is for Jordan. It's from Philip in the chat. He asks, where did the energy come from to form a singularity and for it to expand? If you don't accept creation, you still can't rule out the possibility of the supernatural. Go ahead, Jordan.
So I actually did a debate on my buddy Titus's podcast, Proselytize or Apostatize, on the Kalam cosmological argument, and so I kind of cover that there. Really briefly, there are cosmological models. The short answer is we don't know. Nobody knows the precise mechanism that the Big Bang used. It's a kind of a placeholder. Probably won't have that figured out until we have quantum gravity figured out, and I am not a physicist. But from my understanding, there are cosmological models that are infinite. So, for example, if the gravitational constant is such that the universe is almost flat, you can have the negative energy that comes from gravity, which appears to precisely cancel out the positive energy you get from matter and light, and so you might have a zero energy universe, in which case you wouldn't need any energy, the ultimate free lunch. Is that true? Is that actually what happened? We don't know. And if anybody has more questions, hit me up on Facebook, reasonodoubt.com. I'll answer all of them. Not.com, facebook.com, but Reason to Doubt. So that's it. That's all I had.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that answer there, Jordan. Yeah, thanks again, gentlemen, for a really good debate. Time has flown by. I'm going to throw it over to, actually, before I give it to Praise to shut it down, did the debaters have any closing statements? Did you guys want to plug in your channels or anything like that before we...
Thanks for coming out, Ken. I know you had a lot, your schedule's super busy, so thanks for doing this. It was awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you. And come down and visit Dinosaur Adventureland, Lenox, Alabama. It's a free Christian campground. We have all kinds of stuff. We have a science center. You can see all kinds of stuff about science and the Bible. And we believe the Bible's true, and you're going to be judged one day, son. I want to get ready for that day. I predict you'll be dead for a really long time.
I agree.
Long time. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It was a good debate. You handled yourselves very cordially. It was a very pleasant debate to watch, and I applaud both of you. Thank you so much for it.
All right. Thanks, guys. It was awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks
Okay,
so much,
bye-bye.
guys. God bless. Is that it? We're done?